We'll now move to question time, and I call Senator Henderson.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Communications, Senator McAllister. The ABC has been forced to remove from its website an online news story it now admits contained doctored audio involving an Australian soldier who the ABC had claimed was firing at unarmed civilians in Afghanistan. Inclusion of the doctored audio made it appear as if Australian Defence Force personnel had fired 6 shots instead of just 1. The former Australian Special Forces soldier Heston Russell, who is at the centre of these false claims, has asked to meet with ABC Chairman Kim Williams to discuss this matter. Does the Minister believe the ABC Chair should meet with Mr Russell, and will she direct him to do so?
Thank you, Senator Henderson. Minister McAllister.
Thanks very much, President. Well, the government believes that the ABC is editorially independent, and the government believes that the ABC should continue to be so.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Henderson, first supplementary.
Truth in advertising.
I have called Senator Henderson. Thank you. Senator Henderson.
Thank you, President. Well, given the ABC has admitted the footage was doctored, has the Minister asked the Chairman of the ABC for an explanation? And I would remind Senator McAllister about Section 8 of the ABC Act, which imposes very important obligations on the board to disseminate news and information impartially and accurately.
Thank you, Senator Henderson. Minister McAllister. I'll just let the interjections across the chamber answer the question, will I? Order. 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 Minister McAllister.
Thank you very much, President. Well, the Minister is, of course, aware of the legislation which governs the ABCs and of all of the obligations that arise under that. I do not have the answer to the particular question you ask. I will seek advice, and if I have additional information, I can inform the chamber.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Henderson, second supplementary.
Will the Minister condemn the ABC for this outrageous breach of journalistic ethics and its—
Senator Cash and Minister Watt, order. Please continue, Senator Henderson.
President, may I start?
Senator McKenzie. I think we heard the first part of it, Senator Henderson, and if the Minister isn't clear, she'll seek clarification. Please continue.
Okay, will the Minister condemn the ABC for this outrageous breach of journalistic ethics and its false allegations against Mr Russell as found by the Federal Court, which completely misrepresents what occurred in Afghanistan during this incident in 2012?
Thank you, Senator Henderson. Minister McAllister.
Thank you very much, President. Well, as I have already indicated, the ABC has editorial and operational independence.
Order. Order. Senator Ruston and Senator Cash. Order. Minister, please continue.
That's what you want to do.
It is for—
there we go. There it is.
Order on my right. Minister, please continue.
It is for the ABC to determine how the editing, which has been widely reported, occurred, and I understand that a number of public comments have been made in relation to that. I will say this, that this government supports the ABC and we support its editorial independence. We support the Act, we support the operation of the ABC under the Act.
Order. And Minister McAllister, please resume your seat. I have called— Senator Henderson, no, I will come to you in a moment. I have called for order a number of times. I've called out a number of senators for their very rude and disrespectful and willful interjections. I'm asking that you listen in silence. Senator Henderson.
Point of order on direct relevance. I asked if the Minister will condemn the ABC for this
Thank you.
outrageous breach of
Thank
journalistic
you, Senator
ethics.
Henderson. There is no point of order and the minister is being directly relevant. Minister, please continue.
Thanks very much, President.
You just want to privatise it, we all know.
As
Order. Order on both sides of the chamber. Order. Minister.
As I've indicated, the Minister is well aware of how the Act operates.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Marielle Smith.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. With reference to the statement by the Grattan Institute, and I quote, "The government's Help to Buy bill will help level the playing field when it comes to accessing home ownership," end quote. Can the Minister please outline the Albanese Labor government's plans to ensure all Australians can afford to buy a home of their own and not just some?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Well, thank you, Senator Smith. And as she said in her question, we believe all Australians should be able to afford a safe and secure home. And we believe that you should be able to afford that no matter where you're from, no matter which school you went to, no matter who your parents are or what job you have. That's why we are investing more, to build more homes, to support renters and to help more Australians buy a home sooner. Of course, on the other side, Mr Dutton, what does he believe? He actually believes only some Australians should get to own their own home. The Senator Birmingham yesterday stood up in this place and he said that the LNP stand for home ownership and have it as a core value. What he left out is they don't mean for every Australian. They don't mean for every Australian. What he should have said is the Dutton Liberals are for home ownership, but only for some of us. That's that, because that actually is the Liberal Party position.
Senator
The
McGrath.
core value of home ownership is actually only for some. And any attempt to expand it to more Australians is something Mr Dutton has to say no to. That's why they said no to Help to Buy. That's why they said no to 40,000 low and middle income Australians who want to get into the market. That really showed what Mr Dutton is about. You see, Mr Dutton and the Liberals aren't just saying no to the Albanese government. They're actually saying no to home ownership for Australians on low and middle incomes. That's the core value that the Liberal Party are defending, saying no to the dreams of young people across the country. No, you can't own your own home. No, we don't want to build more houses. No, we don't want social and affordable housing. No, we don't want to support Australians who need it. No, we don't want more houses and more people to own their own homes.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Marielle Smith, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Can the Minister further outline what the Albanese Labor government's $32 billion Homes for Australia plan will mean for Australians?
Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator Smith. Thank you for your question. And our housing reforms will help all Australians, not just some. Historic investments in social and affordable housing to support the most vulnerable in our community. We've increased rent assistance. We're boosting housing supply to ensure there are more homes to rent and to buy, and that they are more affordable for everyday Australians. What have you got against affordability? Our Help to Buy scheme would help 40,000 Australians on low and middle incomes own a home sooner. But there are those in this place hell-bent on blocking these plans for their own political gain. Mr Dutton wants fewer Australians to own a house, and the Greens political party are teaming up with Mr Dutton to ensure fewer people own a house. And what I would say is that working with Peter Dutton to stop meaningful reform isn't negotiating. Holding the futures of Australians to ransom with the Liberals is not negotiating. Denying more houses being built is not negotiating.
Senator Marielle Smith, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Can the Minister explain why the Albanese Labor government is focused on building more homes and increasing housing supply?
Thank you, Minister. Minister Wong. Order on my left. Order. Senator Ruston and Senator Hume, which bit of order doesn't apply to you two? Minister Wong.
Thank you. We on this side know that one of the best ways we can ensure that more Australians can afford a safe home, a secure home, is to build more of them. That's why we've set the ambitious goal of building 1.2 million homes by the end of the decade. On the other hand, the Greens political party don't think housing supply is an issue. Their spokesperson has said, we have enough homes for people to live in.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Reynolds, which bit of order does not apply to you? I'm asking you to come to order and listen in respectful silence. The same goes for you, Senator McGrath. Minister Wong, for a moment you were. Minister Wong, please continue.
The Greens political party's policy is we have enough homes for people to live in. That's what their spokesperson has said, and he's selling a lie to renters to justify what is nothing more than an unholy alliance with Mr Dutton. But building a brand doesn't put a roof over anyone's head. Australians don't want to—
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Senator McKim. Senator McKim.
Minister, a point of order on reflecting adversely on a member of the other place, and in particular using the word lie in relation to a member of the other place.
Senator McKim, I listened to the comment made by the minister. I didn't think it impugned anybody's reputation, but I'm sure as minister, the minister will withdraw if she thinks she has. Minister, please continue.
All right, thank you. I'll rephrase. He's selling a fantasy to renters to justify— would you like me to withdraw? I'll withdraw. He's selling a fantasy to renters to justify your unholy alliance, which has been on display all week.
Thank you, Minister Wong. Time for answering has expired. Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Home Affairs, Senator Watt. Minister, can you confirm that the Assistant Minister for Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs, Mr Julian Hill, has invited United Muslims Australia, a community group with ties to a sheikh who praised Hamas' attack on October the 7th on Israel, to apply for a social cohesion grant from the Commonwealth Government?
Thank you, Senator Ruston. Minister Watt.
Thanks, Senator Ruston. I'm, of course, not aware of what Senator Ruston has asked about. But if I have any further information, I will provide that to the chamber. What I do know, and what I think all Australians know, is that the terrorist attacks that were carried out by Hamas on October the 7th, including the murder of young Israelis peacefully attending a music festival, were absolutely abhorrent. And our government has repeatedly and forcefully condemned them. This parliament unequivocally condemned them in a motion that we passed in October last year. The government has also condemned anyone celebrating those attacks, including Mr Dadun. I think that's how you pronounce his surname. The United Muslims of Australia has a long and successful history in helping many young Muslims in Sydney, providing a space for them to practice their faith and connect with community. The organisation is run by Sheikh Shadi Al-Sulaiman, who is the president of the Australian National Imams Council. He has worked constructively with security agencies and governments, including coalition governments, for many years. Bringing Muslim Australians together in their local communities helps build connections and tackle division, prejudice and hate, and our government supports activities that do seek to bring young Muslim Australians together in their local communities to build connections and build social cohesion.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Ruston, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Last week, the Daily Telegraph reported United Muslims Australia's Sheikh Ibrahim Dadun praised the October 7 terrorist attacks against Israel at a rally organised by extremist group Hizb ut-Tahrir shortly after the attacks, saying, "It's a day of courage, it's a day of happiness, it's a day of pride, it's a day of victory." Minister, how does giving taxpayer money to a hate preacher improve social cohesion?
Thank you, Senator Ruston. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Ruston. I understand that the questions that Senator Ruston is raising relate to objections that appeared in some media outlets last week. As I've said, the United Muslims of Australia organisation is either run or led by Sheikh Shadi Al-Suleiman. He is a well-respected and well-regarded Muslim leader in our community. In fact, he has worked with security agencies and governments, including coalition governments, for many years. As I said earlier, the UMA has a long and successful history of helping many young Muslims in Australia. In fact, you wouldn't probably have to look very far to find evidence of Mr Morrison, the former Liberal Prime Minister, meeting with Sheikh Shadi when he was the Prime Minister. And that is because Sheikh Shadi is respected within the Muslim community and beyond the Muslim community.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Ruston, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Will the Minister for Home Affairs intervene to ensure that no taxpayer money will go to an organisation promoting extremist and anti-Semitic views? And will Assistant Minister Hill be counselled over his extreme lack of judgment?
Thank you, Senator Ruston. Minister Watt.
Well, as I say, the United Muslims of Australia funding the organisation has a strong track record of helping many young Muslims in Sydney, and this is a time when all governments and all political parties should be encouraging social cohesion within our community. I understand that's a concept that is foreign to the Liberal Party, and we should be organisations like the United Muslims of Australia regularly bring young Muslim Australians together to build connections and tackle division, prejudice and hate.
On my left. Thank you, Minister. Senator Hodgins-May.
My question is to the Minister representing Early Childhood Education, Minister Watt. Today's long-awaited Productivity Commission report into Australia's early childhood education and care system recommended the government make childcare free for low-income families. Free and universal childcare is something that the Greens took to the last election and have been campaigning on for decades. Minister, when will your government act to finally make childcare free?
Thank you, Senator Hodgins-May. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Hodgins-May. I'm always very pleased when the Greens Party ask me questions about early childhood education and care, because no government in Australia's history has done more to support early childhood education and care than the Albanese Labor government. Now, we have provided a much-deserved pay rise and have agreed to fund a much-deserved pay rise for early childhood education and care workers of 15% starting in December this year. I've spoken before about the support that we provided to provide cheaper childcare to Australian families and make it more accessible, whether people live in the cities or the regions. Now, Senator Hodgins-May refers to, and I wasn't aware of this, I haven't spent a lot of time looking at the Greens platform, but apparently the Greens platform at the last election talked about universal healthcare, universal childcare. But you know, just wait. It's going to be worth waiting for. It's going to be worth waiting for. The Greens platform said a lot of things at the last election, including support for Help to Buy. That's what the Greens platform said. And for the last week, we've seen the Greens in cahoots with Peter Dutton and the Coalition stopping Labor delivering Help to Buy, even though it's in their own platform. So it would appear that you don't even believe your own platform. You'd much rather pair up with Peter Dutton and the Coalition to stop something that's in your own platform, rather than actually help Australians buy their own home, get early childhood education and care. Tell us what else is on the platform.
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Hodgins-May.
President, I draw the Minister's attention to relevance. I didn't ask about housing. I asked when the Labor government will make childcare free.
Please resume your seat. I will come back to you. Order on my left and right. The senator has a right to call a point of order, and I certainly need to hear that point of order. Senator Hodgins-May.
Thank you, President. Point of order on relevance. I was not asking about housing. I was asking about when the Labor government will commit to making childcare free for all Australian families.
Senator Hodgins-May, there is no point of order. I'm going to ask the minister to continue. Thank you, Minister.
Thanks, President. Well, I can understand why this of all weeks the Greens don't want to talk about housing. I can understand that. Because we know that they're even divided in their own party room about housing and how they should handle this, because we know that some of them acknowledge that we actually should be delivering more housing and we should be helping renters buy homes, but unfortunately the trucks in the Greens have taken over and are stopping any kind of sensible solution on that. Labor has done more on early childhood education and care than any other government. We will continue to do so because we respect the need of Australians to have that service.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired, and I will remind you to refer to leaders in the other House by their correct title. Senator Hodgkins-May.
Let's try again, shall we? Minister, this year we've had 2 government commission reports on childcare released, the ACCC and now the Productivity Commissions, both of which confirmed what we already know about Australia's broken education system. Now the government is claiming you need more time to consult. Minister, surely it's time for a little less conversation and a lot more action. Will your government commit today to fully implementing the Productivity Commission's recommendations in recognition that every kid in the country deserves access to high-quality early education and care?
Thank you, Senator Hodgkins-May. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Hodgkins-May. Well, yes, I am aware that the government has received 2 reports about matters to do with early childhood education and care. That's because we commissioned them. That's because we want to do something about early childhood education and care. You know, we're not about grandstanding. We're about actually delivering. I know, again, that's something the Greens can't quite get their heads around, this notion of delivering. It's about grandstanding. And what I also know is that members of our own caucus here have done more to support early childhood education and care than any single Greens MP or senator ever will. People like Senator Bilyk, who worked in the sector for a long time, people like Senator Grogan, Senator Walsh and many others here who've worked in the sector and supported workers. We won't be taking lectures from the Greens party about platforms that they don't believe in themselves and pair up with Peter Dutton to vote against. What we're going to do is deliver better early childhood education and care, as we are doing, and we're going to support the workers in that industry to get the pay rise that they absolutely deserve.
Thank you, Minister. And I will remind you again, please refer to the Leader in the other House by his correct title. Senator Hodgkins-May.
Minister, last month I asked you why the Labor government wasn't abolishing the childcare activity subsidy activity test, a cruel and punitive test that unfairly punishes low-income families and keeps women out of work. You replied that you were waiting for the Productivity Commission to release its final report. Well, today, this report, a report that you've had since June, confirms the need to abolish the activity test. So I ask again, will you now commit to immediately abolishing the punitive activity test?
Thank you, Senator Hodgkins-May. I'm waiting for silence before I call the Minister. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Hodgkins-May. I understand that it must be frustrating as a Greens member to only ever have the opportunity to ask about what someone else could do because you can't actually do something yourselves. But Labor is more focused on actually doing something in this space. That is why we have made childcare cheaper for Australian families. That is why we have funded and agreed to fund a pay rise for early childhood education and care workers as they deserve. That is why we have made changes to
Minister,
support—
please resume your seat. Order across the chamber. Senator McKenzie, which bit of order did not apply to you? Order. Senator McKim, equally, which piece of order doesn't apply to you? I've asked for order. That is what I expect. Senator Bilyk, seriously. Minister Watt, please continue.
Thanks, President. And the government, of course, recognises that there's additional work to do to ensure more families in Australia can
Minister
access—
Watt, please resume your seat. Minister Wong.
The Minister, point of order, which is the shouting by Senator McKim. The Greens are very, very quick to jump if people people don't comply with the standing orders. They appear to think they don't apply to them. Yeah. Senator McKim, the Minister had barely got to his feet and Senator McKim started shouting again. You dish it out.
Minister Wong, I'm sure you're aware I have called for respectful silence right across the chamber. I have called senators by their names, so I will continue to try and manage the Senate, and I will again remind all senators that the term order applies to everyone. Minister Watt, please continue.
As I say, the government recognises there is additional work to do to ensure more families in Australia can access quality early childhood education and care, and I can tell you there's only one party in this chamber that will ever deliver it, and that is the Labor Party. We know what happened under the coalition. We know the Greens will never get the ability to deliver anything whatsoever other than helping Peter Dutton stop housing. You're pretty good at that, but you don't ever deliver anything in early childhood education and care.
Senator Ciccone.
Thanks a lot, President, and hopefully the Greens won't take credit for my question either. But My question is to the Minister for Trade and Tourism, my very good friend Senator Farrell, and that's twice this week, actually. Late last year, as many would be aware, Australia and the United Arab Emirates announced the commencement of negotiations towards a trade and investment agreement between our two great countries that will lay the groundwork for closer economic ties. Yesterday, Minister, you announced the conclusion of the negotiations with the United Arab Emirates. Could you please inform the Senate about the key outcomes of the agreement and identify the benefits for Australia?
Thank you, Senator Ciccone. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Ciccone for his important question and his wonderful work that he does each and every day for the great state of Victoria. Well, yes, I can answer that question, Senator Ciccone, because yesterday the Albanese Labor government announced the conclusion of a trade negotiation with the United Arab Emirates. It was an important day for Australia's international economic engagement. The UAE is Australia's largest trade and investment partner in the Middle East, with two-way trade worth nearly $10 billion in 2023. It's a great deal for Australian exporters. Over 99% of Australian produce will now enter the UAE tariff-free. Under the deal, Australian exports to the UAE are expected to be higher by $678 million on an ongoing basis. In particular, exports in Senator Ciccone's own state of Victoria will benefit significantly from the agreement. For example, Victoria's exports of agricultural products will benefit from the tariff elimination, putting hard-working Victorian farmers in pole position to compete in the UAE market and the region.
Labor delivering to agriculture again.
Indeed, I couldn't have said it better. I couldn't have said it better, Senator Watt. The deal also unlocks. The deal also unlocks new business opportunities for Australian service providers in the UAE. In addition, the UAE has some of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world. A trade agreement with the UAE will facilitate investment, which will help our transformation of Australia into a renewable energy superpower.
Thank you, Minister Farrell. Senator Ciccone, first supplementary.
Thanks a lot, President. And Minister, I thank you very much for your answer and highlighting the opportunities this new agreement with the UAE presents. As the co-chair of the Parliamentary Friends of the UAE with Senator McLaughlin, can you please elaborate on how the trade agreement with the UAE will deliver real economic benefits to our miners and farmers, as well as providing the cost of living relief to many Australian families?
Thank you, Senator Ciccone. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Ciccone for his first supplementary question. And yes, I can, because Australian exporters will benefit across the board from this comprehensive trade agreement. As mentioned, the deal will remove tariffs on over 99% of Australian exports to the UAE. It will deliver real benefits for Australian farmers and food producers, with estimated tariff savings of over $50 million per year. The mining industry will also benefit through tariff cuts on exports such as alumina, which is valued at more than $1 billion currently. For Australia, the agreement will see cheaper prices at the checkout thanks to the tariff removal on the UAE-made household items, including furniture and building supplies. Australia's households and businesses will save around $40 million a year. It's a great deal for the Australian economy.
Senator Ciccone, second supplementary.
Thank you very much, and indeed a very great deal. And Minister, thank you very much for detailing how the trade and investment agreement will bring down prices for Australian consumers. Can you also further outline how the agreement supports inclusive trade, particularly for First Nations people and many businesses?
Thank you, Senator Ciccone. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Ciccone for his second supplementary question. The trade deal with the UAE includes a dedicated chapter covering trade and labour in answer to the Greens' intervention. This chapter promotes compliance with international labour standards and establishes a bilateral dialogue on labour to advance labour rights. The agreement also includes a standalone chapter on gender balance and women's economic empowerment. And importantly, the deal is Australia's first ever free trade agreement, which includes a chapter on First Nations trade. This chapter provides protections for cultural and traditional knowledge and promotes exchange and cooperation activities in support of Indigenous business interests. The Albanese government is focused on advancing an inclusive approach to trade that seeks to ensure that the benefits and opportunities that flow from trade flow to all Australians.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Hanson.
Thank you very much. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Immigration, Minister Watt. Minister, given that the latest Australian Bureau of Statistics data shows a record-breaking 335,184 net arrivals in the first 7 months of 2024, surpassing even last year's record by 15,361, how does the government justify continuing its aggressive immigration policy? Can you explain why this government remains blind to severe harm this massive immigration increase is causing the Australian people?
Thank you, Senator Hanson. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Hanson. I think any reasonable observer would see the work that has been done by a series of Labor ministers to deal with the higher numbers of migration that Australia has seen since since we emerged from COVID. We all know that immigration essentially disappeared through the COVID pandemic, and we also know that there was a massive rebound in migration numbers post-COVID as we saw students return to Australia, as we saw in some cases Australians return to Australia who had been unable to return, workers as well. And we made very clear some time ago that we recognised we needed to take action on our migration numbers, and that's why, as I say, the Albanese government has taken action in this regard. In particular, we've taken a number of measures to reduce the number of international students coming to Australia. I'm aware that not every part of the community supports that action. In particular, some universities have got concerns, some vet colleges have got concerns, some political parties have got concerns about that. But our view was that it was necessary to reach greater balance in terms of our migration numbers, and that was one of the reasons why we undertook those steps. We've also taken steps such as ending the pandemic event visa, ending unlimited work hours for international students, ending work exemptions for working holiday visa holders. These were all steps that had been taken under the former coalition government that did see a massive increase in the migration numbers that we were seeing in Australia once we emerged from the pandemic. We launched a crackdown on rorts in international education, cracking down on shonky providers and closing loopholes that were being used to bring non-genuine students into the country. And of course, we've implemented a much broader reform package to restore integrity to the system.
Did you conclude your answer? Thank you. Senator Hanson, first supplementary.
I don't think I got an answer to that one. The Albanese government's first federal budget in October of 2022 projected net overseas migration of 470,000 over its first 2 years. Instead, Australia has absorbed nearly 1 million migrants on your watch, doubling the government's own projections. How does the minister explain this consistent failure to adhere to their own misleading immigration targets?
Thank you, Senator Hanson. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Hanson. As I say, we recognise that post the pandemic, the migration number that Australia was receiving was not sustainable and needed to be dealt with. And as I say, much of this was the result of policy failures under the coalition government, in particular by Mr Dutton, going back to his time as the Home Affairs Minister. In fact, Mr Dutton, as the Home Affairs Minister, set the all-time record for visas granted, with 9.6 million granted in 2017-18 and more than 9 million for 3 years running from 2016-17.
Senator Hanson.
Relevance to the question, it's got nothing to do with the previous government. I'm asking questions about their numbers they brought in the country that have increased under their watch.
There is no need for the statement. You've made the point of order. The Minister is being relevant to your question, and I will continue to listen carefully. Thank you, Minister Watt.
Thanks, President. Well, as I say, this government has taken a series of steps to ensure that our migration numbers going forward are more sustainable than they have been. I've already said we ended the pandemic event visa. We increased the temporary skilled migration income threshold. Very importantly, we restored the immigration compliance function in the Department of Home Affairs, a section that Mr Dutton, as the Home Affairs Minister, cut by nearly 50%.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hanson, second supplementary.
After 2.5 years, as I said, Minister, you've actually increased the numbers this year, the highest on record. Minister, given the failures of your government to forecast and control immigration numbers, resulting in 1 million net overseas migrants flooding into the country on your watch, the highest levels in history, will you finally admit your reckless immigration policy is simply a device to cover up Australia's household recession?
Thank you, Senator Hanson. Minister Watt.
Well, I can only repeat the point that this government has taken a series of steps to ensure that our migration numbers are more sustainable than they were emerging from COVID. We've fixed a range of policy failures that were left behind by the coalition government and by Mr Dutton, and they are having some effect. For example, government actions to date have led to substantial declines in migration levels, with student visa grants down by 33.6% this year against the same period last year. So that's a reduction from 428,824 student visa grants in 2022-23, the first year we were elected, to 284,859 grants in 2023-24.
Senator Henderson.
I don't know why Senator Henderson's complaining about this.
Senator Henderson.
So we will continue to take steps. They are having an effect.
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Henderson, I have called you twice. You are being disrespectful towards me. I'm requesting that you listen in silence. You're not in a debate with me, Senator Henderson. Minister Watt, please continue.
Yeah, we are taking steps to make our migration numbers more sustainable, and we'll keep doing so.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Nampijinska-Price.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister for Indigenous Australians, Senator McCarthy. Minister, are you aware that a meeting of the executive was held last night where Mr Matthew Palmer was removed as chair of the Central Land Council? Were you advised in advance of this intended action? If not, when did you become aware of this action? And I seek leave to table correspondence from Mr Palmer relating to this matter that has been distributed in the chamber.
Is leave granted? Senator Wong?
No, leave is not granted, but if I could make just a short statement as to why. I've just been handed this, thank you for the courtesy. There are quite a number of adverse assertions about third parties, usually in the course of a committee hearing. Those would be considered in more detail because obviously tabling it gives these allegations the protection of parliamentary privilege. So we will consider it more closely, but I just wanted to reflect, Senator Nampijinska-Price, that there are obviously assertions here against a number of people, and it is a big step to put it into the parliament and give it privilege. We'd like the opportunity to consider that, and obviously we'll have a discussion with you.
Thank you, Minister. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator, for the question. I was certainly aware that the Central Land Council was having a meeting, but in regards to your question about Mr Palmer, no, I'm not and wasn't aware of that. Senator Price.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Nampijinska-Price, first supplementary.
Minister, is the government satisfied that all proper processes as required under the Aboriginal Land Rights Act, including the provision of interpreters and procedural fairness, have been followed in this instance and in the lead-up to it? On what grounds was this action taken, and does the government endorse the decision?
Thank you, Senator Nampijinska-Price. Minister McCarthy.
President, just if I refer the senator to my previous response, I was certainly unaware of her question or her knowledge about Mr Palmer in that question, so subsequent questions in relation to it are quite difficult to answer.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Nampijinska-Price, second supplementary.
No doubt, very difficult. Minister, are you aware of the disagreements between the CEO of the Central Land Council and the former chair? Were these the reasons for Mr Palmer's removal? And if you don't know if these were, will you seek a full briefing on the matter from the Central Land Council, and will your department launch an investigation into this matter?
Thank you, Senator Nampijinska-Price. Minister.
Thank you, President. Well, clearly, if I was unaware that this was occurring with Mr Palmer, then that goes to the answer to your initial question. In terms of a briefing, I've certainly sought a briefing in relation to all the land councils, whether their election processes, like what's happened with the Anandili-Aqua Land Council, in terms of the Central Land Council, Northern Land Council and Tiwi Land Councils. I do always ask briefings in relation to those land councils.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is for the Minister representing the Minister for Defence, Minister Wong. Over a year ago, I called for an audit of the Office of the Inspector General of the Australian Defence Force, which would have been the first since its creation in 20 years. The audit was blocked, but there was a review. Justice Duncan Kerr conducted the review and delivered the report to the Minister Miles in March this year, and the Minister has sat on it since. It is clear that Defence and the government have become obstructionists and didn't want the public and the veterans to have the report. The government continually told me that the report would be released once consultations were complete. Minister, after 6 months, how many consultations have been completed?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President, and thank you to Senator Lambie for her question. And she and I have had a number of discussions about this. And I understand that the review, the 20-year review into the government, I understand that the government provided the 20-year review to which she refers to the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide to form part of its consideration and final recommendations. I understand that both the 20-year review of the IGADF as well as obviously the Royal Commission have both examined the role of the IGADF and that this role was being examined by both parties. The advice to me is that the government had indicated it would release the report into the IGADF review soon after the release of the Royal Commission, and that is what the government has done. My recollection is the Defence Minister's ministerial statement in relation to the latter was last week. The advice to me is that because the reason for this was to respond to both reports in a holistic way, and a desire to coordinate our response about what the future of the IGADF looks like as we respond both to the review and to the Royal Commission's final report. Obviously, the government tabled the report as I discussed with you earlier today.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Lambie.
I just have a point of order. I simply asked how many consultations have been completed.
Senator Lambie, there was also a significant preamble which the Minister is entitled to address.
I'll take advice about the consultation process, Senator, in relation specifically to the IGADF, but the point I was seeking to make, and if I was unclear, I'm sorry, I was trying to explain that the government's thinking was that both this review and the Royal Commission were going to look at the role of the IGADF, and so the government sought to try and deal with both issues concurrently.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Lambie, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. I have been told by Minister Miles, Minister Gallagher and yourself that the government was consulting with stakeholders, but the only stakeholder that I can see that seems to have been consulted is Defence's media team, because let's be honest, it's in damage control. Minister, could you also give me a full list of those who participated in these so-called consultations, unless you know who they are off the cuff today?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Wong.
As I said, I think these were issues considered in the context of the Royal Commission, but I certainly will get advice and come back to you if I can, Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Lambie, second supplementary.
Thank you. After more than half an hour yesterday debating this in this place why I couldn't have the IGADF report, it was found on the Royal Commission's website, in other words, publicly available. 20 minutes later it vanished. Turns out it was deleted. The government says that it was accidentally uploaded. I say that's rubbish and that'll be proven. Minister, who gave the orders to remove the IGADF report from the Royal Commission's website yesterday?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Wong.
Well, can I say, Senator Lambie, at the time we were debating this, and I think you and I had some conversations about the matter being tabled soon, I wasn't aware, and I don't think any of us were, that the report had gone on to the Commission website. I am not familiar with the sequence by which that decision occurred. I assume these were decisions that the Royal Commission made, but I will get further advice on that, Senator Lambie, about how that process came about.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Polley.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Indigenous Australians, Senator McCarthy. Housing is central to the government's commitment to closing the gap, particularly in remote communities. Recognising our government has been working hard to shift the dial for First Nations people and make a practical difference in their lives, such as by accelerating construction of housing in remote communities. Can you, Minister, outline how this and other measures by our government is supporting housing for First Nations people in the Northern Territory?
Thank you, Senator Polley. Minister MacArthur.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Polley for the question. A very important one, as the Albanese government is delivering safe and secure homes right across Australia, including in remote First Nations communities. When you want the work done, call the Labor Party.
That's right.
We're getting on with the job. We're getting on with the job of building 1.2 million homes, helping people buy and making renting fairer. Unlike
Minister
you guys,
McCarthy, please resume your seat. Please resume your seat. Order. 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 Senator Colbeck, I've called order. Minister McCarthy, please continue.
We're getting on with the job of building 1.2 million homes, helping people buy and making renting fairer, unlike this lot across the tide. We need all options on the table, President, and that's what this Labor government is doing, because we know this issue is too important to wait. Too many Indigenous Australians live in overcrowded and run-down houses. Addressing overcrowding and poor housing is crucial to improving health, education, employment and justice outcomes. We're providing immediate support to the areas of greatest need, including the remote NT, where overcrowding is the highest. Earlier this year, former Minister Burney and also Selina Yubo, who was the Indigenous member for the Labor government, and also the member for Lingiari, Marion Scrimgeour, we signed a historic deal with the Northern Territory to improve housing over 10 years. $4 billion, President. This will see up to 270 homes.
Order.
So you don't want to see houses for remote regional Australia? You don't want to see houses full stop, not even for remote regional Australia. What about the $4 billion investment in the Northern Territory? Haven't heard a word from that side, not one word, only constant criticism when we know we need the houses in remote and regional Australia, President.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Polley, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, for outlining the government's commitments to improving housing for our First Nations people in the Northern Territory. Minister, can you tell us more about the $4 billion agreement and what the practical outcomes this investment is having in reducing overcrowding and improving the quality of homes in remote communities, and more about your can-do attitude?
Thank you, Senator. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President. Yes, the Northern Territory has the highest level of overcrowding in the country, and this is a serious matter, President. Better housing for Aboriginal people living in remote Northern Territory communities is a priority for the Albanese Labor government. We know that overcrowding leads to poorer outcomes in terms of health, education and safety. If we invest in better housing, we will get better outcomes across the board. We are working to have overcrowding to halve overcrowding by building 270 houses each year, or 2,700 homes over the 10-year agreement. This is on top of the 1,950 bedrooms and over 200 homes which were built under the previous national partnership for remote housing. And we are committed, President, to practical actions that improve the lives of First Nations people. Building more homes in remote communities will reduce overcrowding and improve health and education outcomes.
Senator Polley, second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. It's great to hear about how this investment is leading to tangible outcomes for First Nations people in remote communities. What challenges is the government working to overcome to deliver on this commitment?
Thank you, Senator Polley. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Polley. Yes, now the work does begin, and having conversations this week with the new Minister for Housing Construction, Bill Yan, was critically important for us to make sure that the $2 billion from the Commonwealth and the $2 billion from the Northern Territory actually does hit the ground in terms of remote and regional Australia. I do want to see the Northern Territory and federal governments working together to deliver on this historic agreement for the benefit of First Nations people. It's a lesson that his colleagues in here, Minister Yan, his colleagues in here in the federal parliament should take note of. The Liberal Party in this place seems more interested in opposing everything for the sake of opposition. Peter Dutton's Liberal Party, Peter Dutton MP's Liberal Party, doesn't have a plan for the Northern Territory. They don't have a plan for housing.
Thank you, Senator McCarthy. I do remind you as well to refer to the leader in the other place by his correct title. Senator Rennick.
My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. In 2022, Pfizer derived $1.4 billion in sales in Australia and an operating profit of $90 million, a ratio of just 7%. This is despite Pfizer earning $100 billion in worldwide sales and an operating profit of $35 billion, a ratio of 35%. Pfizer's Australia's intercompany assets show a loan balance with Pfizer Ireland of over $1 billion. Australia imposes a 10% withholding tax on royalties paid to Ireland, which added to Ireland's company tax rate of 12.5 cents means that at a total of 22.5 cents there is a lower rate of tax on profits sent offshore than profits retained in Australia. Will the Albanese government lift withholding taxes to stop profit shifting by foreign multinationals?
Thank you, Senator Rennick. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Rennick for the question. I think we've been clear about the tax arrangements that we've been put in place to address multinational tax and some of the changes that this parliament has proposed. So we have a pretty full, as I've said a number of times, in terms of our tax reform agenda. We've dealt with the revised income tax arrangements, which gave every taxpayer in the country a tax cut and in a fairer and better way. We have also got our super tax that is before this parliament that we would like to do for those high balance super accounts, and we have moved some legislation. In fact, this year, the Treasury Laws Amendment making multinationals pay their fair share. Integrity and Transparency Act passed the parliament, which limited interest deductions for multinationals and improving corporate disclosures on subsidiaries and delivering on key parts of the October budget's multinational tax integrity package. So that is what the government has announced. That's what we've done. We don't have the plans as outlined by Senator Rennick.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Rennick, first supplementary.
The Income Tax Act exempts foreigners from paying capital gains tax on non-real assets if they own less than 10% of the company. This exempts many foreign investment funds and holder of water rights. Why does the Tax Act exempt foreigners from paying capital gains tax, and how is this fair to hard-working Australians who do pay capital gains tax?
Thank you, Senator Rennick. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, and I'll see if there's anything further I can provide to this answer. But we do have arrangements in place to tax multinational firms in this country, and we are always looking at ways to ensure that they are meeting the needs of our revenue base, and also working globally at how we address some of the challenges around multinational companies. So we are this is an area of interest for us. We are and have passed legislation to protect and better improve our revenue base in relation to multinational tax and making sure they are paying their fair share of tax and doing what we need them to do to support the services that we provide through the revenue that we do collect, Senator Rennick. But if there is anything further I can provide in answer to your question, I will come back to the chamber.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Rennick, second supplementary.
The Income Tax Act exempts foreign holders of bonds purchased through a public offer from paying withholding tax on interest earned from those bonds. Why does the Tax Act exempt foreigners from paying tax on interest income, and how is this fair to Australians, especially retirees who have to pay tax on their savings income?
Thank you, Senator Rennick. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator Rennick. And I am.
Keep him in your party.
Order.
I know he has. Senator Rennick has become a lot chattier since he left the opposition benches, that's for sure. Senator Rennick, I don't have the answer to that question with me. Yes, but in a general sense, the approach that we take when you look.
Order.
The approach that the government takes when we look at all of our tax base, essentially, and the different measures we have, and there are a range of different exemptions and treatments depending, as you've pointed out, on what part of that base you're from, whether you're an individual taxpayer, a business taxpayer, and some of the different exemptions that exist. I mean, we do constantly look at ways to make sure that it's fair for all and that there is a level playing field. But I will come back, Senator Rennick, if there's more I can.
Senator Sterle.
Thank you, President. My question is to the fabulous Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. The Master Builders Association has said, and I quote, "Help to Buy is a sensible policy approach that looks at lifting housing affordability," unquote. The Australian Housing and Urban Research Institute has said, and I quote again, "We certainly would like to see the bill passed. Shared equity programs have been some of the most successful and the most effective housing policy interventions," unquote. Noting the Albanese Labor government's Help to Buy plan would help 40,000 Australians into home ownership, what other measures is the government taking to help even more Australians into housing and home ownership?
Thank you, Senator Sterle. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Sterle for the question, and indeed for all of us on this side who are really focused on making sure that we are doing everything we can to build more housing in this country and to ensure that more people can become homeowners in this country. And we've seen this week the very unholy alliance, the very uncomfortable alliance of those opposite on this side of the chamber and those down that end, holding hands, hugging each other at times, really. We've seen it. The proverbial hug, the dirty deals.
Minister Gallagher, Minister. I'm waiting for silence. Minister.
It was uncomfortable for all of us to watch, don't worry. That a very unusual partnership that we've seen this week. And the partnership has been formed over a united view from those at this end of the chamber to oppose building more houses and getting more people into home ownership. That's exactly what it did. The Help to Buy scheme is about ensuring that 40,000 people who've saved and worked hard are able, with a bit of help from the government, get into home ownership. And we can think of a lot of essential workers who have raised this with us over the years, and we've sought to respond to that with a program that those over here don't want to be part of because they always object to everything that the government wants to do, and those down there who pretend that they campaign in the interests of housing and then come in here and vote against it. That's what we've seen this week. This government is doing everything we can across the board on supply, working with states and territories, working with local government, working with private investors, working with the social and community housing sector to make sure that we're doing everything we can after a decade of neglect from those opposite.
Order. To all those senators who I've called more than once today, I would ask that you listen in respectful silence for the short time that we have question time left. I should not have to repeatedly call your name. Senator Sterle, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. The Albanese Labor government wants to make it easier for Australian renters to become Australian homeowners. Our comprehensive housing plan was designed to support Australians at all stages of the housing ladder. How is the government helping renters, including those who won't be able to transition to home ownership without Help to Buy?
Minister Gallagher. Minister Gallagher, please resume your seat. Senator McKenzie, can you either listen in silence or I invite you to leave the chamber? Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. I thank Senator Sterle for the supplementary. And Senator Sterle's question's right, because he's saying, how are we helping renters? And now those who we would like to transition from renting into home ownership, but for those who have opposed Help to Buy, they're pretending they're kicking it off for 2 months as a way, because they are so feeling so awkward about this unholy alliance that's been formed, the anti-housing alliance in this chamber, that they're pretending their vote against the bill is actually really a delay. Well, they need to be accountable. I think those who have opposed Help to Buy need to be accountable and upfront about how they've behaved in this chamber this week. They haven't delayed the bill. They have voted against the bill. Every single time their vote's been put, they have voted against it. Now, they don't want to be upfront. They don't want to be accountable for that. And so they're pretending they're delaying the bill. But that bill has been stopped by this Senate this week, and for all those who would have benefited, you need to be accountable for that.
Thank you, Minister Gallagher. And I don't appreciate whoever it was that called out time. I'm managing the chamber. Senator Sterle, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. And thank you, Minister. The Albanese Labor government has invested in boosting housing in every budget and surplus. Why have we had to make such significant investments in housing? What roadblocks has the government faced in its efforts to get more Australians into home ownership?
Thank you, Senator Sterle. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much. And I thank Senator Sterle for that question, and again for highlighting the fact that the housing shortage in this country did not happen overnight. That's right. It was created by a federal government that was so busy fighting itself over energy policy, they didn't actually even care about housing. They didn't have a housing minister. They didn't get together with housing ministers around the country. The only policy they had—
your seat. Senator Hughes, I'm going to ask you to listen in silence or invite you to leave the chamber, and Senator Hume, perhaps you could join her. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. They didn't care about housing then, and then they walk in here and demand to know what's been happening. Well, we've done everything we could in the 2 years that we've been making decisions about housing, everything we could, whether it's renters, whether it's those that need social and affordable housing, whether it's those that need homelessness services, who you also didn't care about, whether it's about supply, whether it's about the Housing Australia Future Fund, and we've done it against a tide of all of you being opposed to it. And that's what we've seen this week, and you need to be accountable for that, for a problem that you created, and you won't be part of any solution.
The time for answering has expired. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I ask that further questions be placed on notice.